My name is David Harris. I'm the Managing Director at the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice. And on behalf of Dean Minow and Charles Ogletree, I want to welcome you to the law school today. This is the last event we'll be doing this year, this academic year, and it seems quite fitting. To me it's interesting. We've been showing a large number of films, and we've been showing a number of films by women that have been really incredibly powerful. Last year we showed Rebel by Maria Carter. This year we showed, and last year we also showed Free Angela by Shola Lynch. And this year we showed This Little Light of Mine by Robin Hamilton. I don't know how many of you were able to see that. It's a fabulous film. And we showed Lacey Schwartz's Little White Lies last month. I can think of no better way to conclude than with this film. I think you will all find this film a fitting end to our year. And I need to say that as the father of a 15-year-old who reread To Kill a Mockingbird this year with him, and we watched the film, it reminds me of just how powerful it is, how powerful and timeless and enduring it is. And in a way, it's great to be able to think about it in today's times. I think it really does resonate today with a special resonance and really gives us pause to consider where we are as a society, where we've come, and where we still need to go. The last thing I'll say is our next event will be the Martha's Vineyard Forum. It took a sabbatical last summer. We didn't do it, but this summer we're doing it again on August 19th. The topic is Black and Blue, Policing the Color Line, and it promises to be quite a rewarding event. So the other thing that those of you who've been here before know is I'm not big on introductions. So I figure people can go look up bios, but I do think that today it's important to realize that we're really fortunate to have two very powerful and effective guests. Sandra Jaffe is the filmmaker and teaches film screenwriting at Northeastern, and has done a number of screenwriting assignments in various venues, and has written extensively, and has received numerous awards. I'm going to let her introduce our other guest, Diane McWhorter, who is probably known to most of you and has been involved in events that we've done in the past. But I'll let Sandy do that, and with no further ado, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the film. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And David did a great introduction of the film. It is, when I made this film, it was to talk about how To Kill a Mockingbird still resonates in our national discourse about race, class, and justice. And it really is a sort of then and now piece. And I really wanted to do it before the end of the year because Diane has been in Cambridge for a while, and she is in the film, and she grew up with me in Birmingham, and we'll talk about that after the film, but I really wanted her to be able to have the pleasure of her company at the talkback. And she is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. We are very proud of her. Most of us are very proud of her. Some of us are very proud of her in Birmingham. And but the rest of the world is proud of her. More on that later. And she wrote a the penultimate book about the civil rights struggle in Birmingham called Carry Me Home. And you could read that on your summer vacation if you haven't read it yet. It would take you the whole time. Okay, so thanks, and we'll talk after.
So I really appreciate it. Thank you. So as I said before, this is Diane McWhorter, and we are a little bit of a study in contrast, because though we both grew up in Birmingham, and thus the impetus way later for the book and the exhaustive study of the civil rights movement and what happened in Birmingham, I too was very much influenced, and thus the film. So, but we were studying contrast. We knew each other when we were young, and then Diane went to private school. I went to public school. I went to the same school as the white students in the film, actually. And Diane went to private school and was a sorority girl. And I went to a school, I was Jewish, and I went to a school where Jews weren't allowed to be in sororities. So we were a study in contrast, and then we found each other later on as adults. So, as she says in the film, I should let her speak for herself, most of the white people were sort of indifferent, is how she describes it. Mm-hmm. Do you want to press on with that?
Yeah, I think that it's the problem is not so much that there are a lot of haters, but that there are so many people who just kind of buy into the whatever is normal at the time, and you see that going on all the time here. Now that you can kind of acclimate yourself to almost any situation and convince yourself that it can't be changed, that it's just the way things are. And I think that's one of the lessons of Atticus, is that even if you have no chance of changing anything, you still have to do what's right, if only in order to be on the right side of history. And I think that's the appeal of him. It's funny because I kind of always wonder. I've seen this film several times, and it gets better and better. It's just so good, Sandy.
Oh.
It's just, just
so
really.
Good. Thank you for being it.
Really,
Thank you for being it.
I was really able to focus on a lot of the images in a way that I hadn't before. It's just a wonderful job. It's just beautifully done and really moving. And just sort of apropos of the theme about this, To Kill a Mockingbird is sort of the gift that keeps on giving. I had never quite I remember when I was kind of revisiting this work, I was wondering, I had to go back and look to see if Tom Robinson had been shot while trying to escape, which is what usually happens, or whether he actually had been trying to escape. And the book makes it clear that he was trying to escape. And I kind of wondered about that literary choice on the part of Harper Lee, because I thought that it was, the reality would probably be that he was just shot for no good reason, kind of lynched after the fact. And then I started thinking about it, watching this today, that the reason he, and I also couldn't quite understand why he did it. Then I realized the book doesn't make it explicit, I don't think, that he would have probably gotten the electric chair, and so that at least he was dying on his own terms. And anyway, that just occurred to me for the first time as many times as I've seen the movie and read the book. So I wanted to ask you a couple of things. I wanted to say too that Mountain Brook is, I just looked this up, and as of 2010 was the 9th richest community in the United States.
We lived on the port side of Mountain Brook.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
I actually technically lived in Birmingham, so, but although my book opens at the Mountain Brook Club, which was sort of the seat of power in Birmingham.
Which we were not allowed. No blacks and no Jews, so
That's
we were
right.
not allowed.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't we? I think maybe we should just open it up now. This seems to be like a really interesting crowd, and I was kind of looking around, and everybody seemed pretty rapt by the show.
Any questions? Comments?
Just discussion.
Yes.
I work at Cambridge and Latin, and we, about 2 or 3 years ago, they put on Hairspray. Mm-hmm. And as they were reading the script, there were so many, terms and concepts that completely eluded the students. I sat there while they did the dry reading of the script. So, like Geritol, they had no idea what that was.
It's a real period piece. Yeah.
They did not know who the Gabor sisters were. They didn't know
How could they not know that?
Russians were our enemy.
Right.
And one of the students said, what was wrong with the city of Baltimore that they just used the N-word so freely? And like they literally thought it was localized to Baltimore. And
Have they seen The Wire?
maybe. So our response was to have a restorative justice circle, and we had quite a few men and women who had been alive during that time and weren't like little kids during that time. They were kind of like the peers to the people in the movie. And we explained to them like what these terms meant, and what the elephant was in the room was the N-word and racism, and they just couldn't grasp how freely people were racist. But then there were just the cultural things. Did you see any, like, did these kids have a direct connection to everything, or was there a gap? I feel like working with high school students every day, they really don't have a firm grip on how much, how intensely different. Even housewife, they didn't understand what the concept of a housewife was.
It's really scary what you're saying. I'm starting to get really upset.
That is seriously what I'm saying. When they were reading the script, I could tell by the way they pronounced the words. I just kept writing all these phrases down, and I was like, do you guys know what this means? And so for us to talk about these things and in a safe space and circle with the entire cast and stay with them throughout the production was very helpful. But I'm not sure if the cultural blindness was experienced in Birmingham with the students?
Well, I can tell you that, first of all, I think that's fabulous that they were able to learn about another time period and mores of that time period through Hairspray, which is the most fun piece. But regarding this piece, I can give you an example. Kim, who played Calpurnia, I interviewed also her mother and her grandmother, who, as she talks about, was a Calpurnia. It was for a brief period. But they told me, and she verified this, that she kind of got, before this, stuff went on. I mean, these kids are all taken to the Civil Rights Institute. They all are exposed to everything. But she didn't really get it in a visceral way until she was involved in this production, and they were immersed a little more into what was going on. Doug Jones lectured them for 3 hours about what happened with the Birmingham 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, and they heard all about the trial for a very long time. She basically responded, and her relatives told me that she finally got it. She finally got why they wanted to talk to her about this stuff all the time. And she said, yeah, I remember hearing that story about my mom. She was there, what my grandmother and grandparents had to run to where the bombing was. And I remember my mom was a twin, and one of the twins got lost, and they couldn't find her, and they got really nervous. And so it sort of became real for her. I don't think that was an unusual experience. I will say when we were in Montgomery, because they reprised the play in Montgomery for state dignitaries and the foot soldiers, I offered to take them over to the Rosa Parks Museum to tour because they had a bunch of downtime. And all the Fairfield kids but one slept in because they'd already been over there on a field trip. So they are certainly learning their history, and they have a lot of history to learn, and it's, in some ways, it's kind of living history for them. But again, like they say, they live in bubbles. The white kids live in the white community, and the black kids live in the black community. And getting to really have this kind of exchange was pretty important for them, and I highly recommend it for everybody.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about was how, Sandy's been, I should mention that Sandy's been trying to get a nationwide program going for collaborations like this, because oftentimes when you see white students, especially from a place like Mountain Brook, I know that my kids had like a community service requirement in high school, and it's usually kind of the privileged white kids helping out the poor kids. So this is like a really good platform for them meeting as equals, and having a sort of equal collaboration as opposed to sort of in a helping situation. So if any of you have any ideas about how that might get going, talk to Sandy. Yeah.
Can I, that's a great segue to my question, which is, was there any lasting socialization? Tell us about the two groups of students.
I mean, do they
after
still contact each other and stuff?
Yeah, or even during the period of the film. Obviously, they had rehearsals intensely, but were there, other outlets for them?
Well, I can't say that, everybody got invited to everybody's house for dinner. In fact, I don't think anybody did. But they were together a lot in a very intense way for a very intense period. And they were also mostly seniors. So the young man from Fairfield who says, and we won't get to see them again, it's not because they live across town, it's because most of them are going off to college. So they were busy doing these ridiculous marathon rehearsals. I mean, this play got a lot of attention. Somebody's mother must have been a PR person or something, because the press got wind of it and it became a whole national story. So it was a huge deal for these kids. And they were studying and applying to college, and, a lot of stuff was going on. So, but to answer your question in terms of after the play, I always answered this the same way, because I really do believe this. I think most of us have a hard time keeping up with anybody period. Even the kids that young, they don't keep up probably with the kids they went to high school with, much less that other high school across town where they did this fabulous thing. They had some rendezvous, some reunions. But they all keep up with each other on Facebook, all of them. And I keep up with them too. I kind of stalk them and know who's doing what. So.
Also, I think it's in the nature of these experiences that you don't quite know the impact until later. For example, I don't remember hearing about the 16th Street church being bombed when it happened, and Kennedy was assassinated only 2 months later, and I vividly remember everything about that. And yet I ended up spending 18 years writing a book about these very events. So somehow it gets, it kind of gets into you at some cellular level, perhaps, and then, it comes up when it needs to.
Also, I just wanted to answer that question one more way, but I'm not sure it was your question. It was your question, I think. I thought it was really interesting. It's not in the film, but I had the experience of the young girl who played Scout. When I first interviewed her, and we were talking about, the whole idea that they're doing this, that she probably hasn't been around black people before and stuff like that. I said, well, what's that like for you? And she answered in a very, I'm 17-year-old, and I want to look really good right now, to her, God bless her, way. And she said, well, I don't see color. And I kind of blanched. And I was like, shh, be quiet. You're not supposed to, you can't reprimand her for that. She doesn't know any better. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So you don't see color. So then at the end, when I interviewed her months later, what I call these sort of post-play interviews that I conducted, she says that at the end of the film, she said, I said, what did you gain from this? She said, well, race is on the table now. And it just showed me how much she had evolved, that she got it. You can't talk about race until you experience people of another race. I mean, it's sort of definitional. So that was very gratifying for me, and I hold on to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say, part of my family's from Mississippi, so I really admire you, both of you, and your book. I'm kind of interested in your seeing the movie when you couldn't see it at first. I think you snuck away to see it for a few Saturdays, I think, To Kill a Mockingbird, and then you couldn't. I was wondering to hear that story, who you shared it with. But the second thing I'm concerned about is I saw white and blacks hugging at the end, but I got a 13-year-old who goes to maybe the most integrated school in Cambridge, Rindge and Latin, and you go on field trips and the whites are in a minority. But you go to the cafeteria and blacks and whites are sitting at different tables. Mm-hmm. It's still incredibly segregated. So those are my two things I want to say.
Mm-hmm. So you're referring to the part of my book where, when I mentioned in the film that everybody our age, what the demonstrations meant to us was that we couldn't go downtown to the movies anymore. And I always have to explain to kids that there were no multiplexes then. So if you wanted to see a movie, you had to go downtown. And
on a bus.
On a bus, yeah.
You were going to see the movie, Mockingbird.
That's it, yeah. So I would go downtown to the movie, and then it started, so So the movie opened, as I said, when the demonstrations, Martin Luther King and Fred Shuttlesworth's demonstrations opened in Birmingham in the spring of '63, April 2nd, and the dogs and fire hoses were brought out a month later. And so that's when the parents definitely said, you can't go downtown anymore. And the movie we were going downtown to see was To Kill a Mockingbird every Saturday. And I think, I look back on that, and I hadn't even put that, I hadn't really even put any of that together until I started doing the research on my book, and I saw that these two things coincided. My class, I'm sure this was a traumatic experience for every single class member of mine, sitting in that movie theater watching this, and it dawning on you that he's not going to get off, and that you're rooting for him. And we never discussed it, but we could all recite that "Hey, Mr. Cunningham" speech, and then we kept going back to the movies every week just to have this sort of little communion again, I guess, but it was not spoken of. It's kind of a cliche that white kids growing up under segregation have their epiphany, their moment of truth, and it's kind of this act of the psychologists would call this cognitive dissonance, where you have clashing, information in a way, and usually it has to do with seeing somebody be nasty to a beloved housekeeper or something, babysitter, and for me, it was that moment of cognitive dissonance was definitely going to that movie.
And this really came through to me, so.
Okay, thanks.
But in terms of what you were saying about, Beverly Tatum has that book, the white kids are sitting on one side of the room and the black kids are sitting on the other. I think it's, I think that this is pretty common, in a lot of places.
Cambridge.
Yeah, but not just Cambridge. I mean, a lot of places. I think people are drawn to who they're comfortable with, and not a sociologist.
My favorite line in that's just so poignant to me in the film is, I just love Stephanie. I don't know if you might have to see it a couple more times to be like focused in on. She's with the glasses. She's the one at the end who says, we can sit by each other and nobody's going to kill us, basically. And I'm thinking, oh my God. Well, and then of course now everything that's happened, and Glenn, I can go anywhere and nothing's going to happen to me. And then now we realize that's really not true, for one thing. But it's sort of like, really, that's what we should be grateful for, that they're just that. I just love Stephanie. Yeah.
So first, Sandy, if you do start something more to continue with this, I want to contribute to the Kickstarter
So calling
campaign.
you. Great.
And I just want to speak to the cellular impact of collaboration, equal collaboration. I grew up in Cambridge, and I went to Birmingham in 1964 as a college student, and I taught at Miles College, which is in Fairfield, and I worked side by side with Miles College students, and it changed my life forever. And I made friendships that I still have, and I came back and had to find out about the diversity in my hometown in Cambridge. I thought Harvard Square was the center of Cambridge, but actually there was East Cambridge. I didn't know about East Cambridge.
And West Cambridge, yeah.
And West Cambridge. Well, I knew more about West Cambridge, but so I had to go out of my culture to learn about my culture, and it's so complicated, but this is a fabulous movie.
Oh, thank you.
One memory, I just want to say, so we were black and white college students working together, and a very courageous white family in Mountain Brook who were Jewish, the Zukowskis, invited us. Did you know them?
Oh yeah, they're actually not Jewish.
Oh, okay.
But they were very liberal.
Okay,
Yeah, they
well,
were.
I thought that's why they were so liberal, because they were Jewish. What do you know? So they invited all of these 20-odd black and white students to their backyard in the summer of 1964. If anybody knows the history, you know what was happening that summer. And they had a barbecue for us, and we stood in their backyard and stood in a circle and sang, "We Shall Overcome." And the neighbors, they didn't care about the neighbors. They had that kind of courage.
That's so great.
I think he went to Harvard. He had a big bank job in Birmingham and got fired basically for being liberal on race was the real reason, but the technical reason was that he had proposed a tax on Coca-Cola to raise money for education. You know, in compensation for like rotting the teeth of the school children or something. Anybody else?
Yes. Last one.
Yeah, I want to underscore how powerful the film was, and thank you so much for it. There were a number of times when I got teary, and one of them was watching the kids hugging each other toward the end. I was thinking about the phrase, the beloved community, and how these folks had created one right there. So I second what Prill said about how it would be wonderful to see this experience replicated throughout the country.
I think it's really necessary because it really does change you. I mean, I always say if I had only had that experience myself when I was in high school and never really had it, you have to really make conscious efforts to, be with people who are different. If you live in a community where everybody's the same, and I think that's what it's about. But I was just showing the film at a high school in Dallas, and I was very struck by, I had a lot of interaction with the kids. I was there all day. And I was very struck by a comment that somebody made. We were talking about, it was right on the heels of the SAE frat incident. And those two boys, college boys, were actually from Dallas. And Oklahoma, as you know, it's right next door to Dallas. So it was very raw. And it really kind of just happened. And so I brought that up to them. And it sort of engendered a lot of conversation. And one of the things we were talking about was, well, where did they learn that? How did they learn that? And somebody asked me a little later on in the discussion, well, how did you grew up in Alabama during this, highly racist time. How did you not learn, just to be a racist? And that gave me pause for a second, and I had to think about it. Well, that's the way my parents raised me, I guess, but I always wonder when stuff like that happens, when somebody puts a noose on a statue in Mississippi and all that, I just always wonder, well, what was going on that they think in any way, shape, or form any of this is okay, good, right? I mean, where were the parents? What's going on in these houses? Who teaches these kids? That's just my little soapbox.
We have another Miss Birmingham here, you.
Kitty Cox,
Kitty.
also from Mountain Brook.
Yeah, Mountain Brook.
High school classmates. Cindy, it's fabulous. I saw the movie really early on. It's just absolutely fabulous. But here's kind of a filmmaker question. I mean, I don't do what you do for a living for a good reason, but don't you just want to take the top off and throw a few more things in? I mean, with the Ferguson and the SAE, and how do you know when you're done with it?
Well, after 8 years, but the good news about it's taking so long is that I was so happy to get the chance to get John Lewis in the film, and had I really finished before then, I wouldn't have done that. And I think I was very happy to have him. But there was a lot of stuff that already, I had a whole bunch of stuff with Brian Stevenson in, and Steve Bright, who is also a giant legal luminary, for human rights and anti-death penalty and all that. I had all this stuff about equal justice, and I had to take it out because it was just too much of a left turn for this film, and I had a whole lot of everything about everything, and I don't know, you just have to be strong. Yes.
The conversation wanders to criminal justice, and one is struck by both how much has changed and how little has changed, and the places that are the most reactionary and unchanging are surprisingly, it seems to me, in the justice system. And we sit here in the halls of Harvard Law School, and I wonder what it is about the institution of law that makes it so difficult for the law to sort of police itself. I mean, this is a story about the law being incapable of managing race, and yet we're still immersed up to our earlobes in the day-to-day news all across the country of people who never even make it to the courthouse, and so many of them don't even make it to the police station. And
Yeah, no, I hear
and
you.
heaven help them if they do. And I just wonder about that strange disconnect that our justice system is perhaps one of the most unjust systems in our culture.
Well, my crackpot theory, which means I think it's true, but I can't exactly prove it, is that police brutality is sort of the continuation. It's the vestige of lynching. It's this kind of like quasi-official way of, in kind of community sanctioned way of policing, of enforcing this reign of terror on black people. So so if that's. If it's already corrupted at that level, then it's going to be corrupted on up the justice chain. Yeah.
Sandy, have the two schools collaborated on other theater pieces? And if so, I find that hard to believe that they wouldn't have had such a drive and impetus to do it.
Both of those teachers, Patsy, who was the choir teacher, Fairfield did not even have an auditorium. They collaborated with the choir teacher. Those teachers met at a conference and had always wanted to collaborate, and they finally got it together. But it was very difficult. Because high schools are very, bureaucracies, and they're very hard to get organized to do something like this, and everybody has to sign off on it, and anyway. So those two teachers retired, and, I think that they just lost there was nobody to drive it, I think, and I'm always emailing everybody, why don't you do this again? Come on, let's do this, and
But didn't the choir, so what happened, something happened at Fairfield, they lost some program.
Well, they lost their choir stuff, but the good news is they actually broke ground all these years later on a fine arts building and a fine arts center at Fairfield. Yeah, they broke ground on it, and it's actually going to be a community place. Miles is going to be able to use it. A whole bunch of people in Fairfield will be able to use it. So thankfully.
Did it have anything to do with this, with the production, do you think?
I don't think it didn't have anything to do with it, but I think that, 6 years later or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Can I use the prerogative to ask a question too?
Please.
So again, it's fabulous, it's fantastic, and I think we could go on forever. But there's one thing about the criminal justice issue, in fact. It is fascinating the way it ends, right? That it ends with the sheriff making this declaration, right? So on some level, there's a sense of redemption there. On another level, it's a sense of the arbitrariness of the law, right? That he can make that decision and he effectively closes it down. And, I think it's fascinating. There's this kind of sense of redemption in the film, and there are all these themes. My question, in a way, really is, did the students spend time kind of dealing with the internal contradictions themselves, talking to each other about the book and kind of wrestling with some of these things?
I wish I could say that I knew definitively that they did or they didn't, but I am guessing that that they did that mostly at the beginning. I wasn't there for the table read, but I was there when the two schools met, but I was not there for the table read. And I know it was very intense, and especially because the white kids have to say the N-word, and that was really torturous for them. Because, they didn't want to offend anybody, obviously. And I think they talked about what they talked about probably up top. Now, they talked about a lot of stuff with race and their different cultures all the way through when they would hang out. And I wasn't privy to that either. But I would hear that they, we're really different, but some we're also like, I don't think that, no. The short answer is, I don't think they got into it the way if you were really trying to, if I was to do this again, if I was to manage this, and I am talking to somebody at the ed school about how to do this kind of thing, we would actually design, and doesn't have to be To Kill a Mockingbird, that's the thing, and probably shouldn't be, but we would design a whole system where we would come in and ask questions about where they're at and measure sort of what's going on and what their expectations were and what their experience was, and then maybe stop midway and see how it's going, and then at the end figure it out again and see what kind of impact this is really having. But that didn't happen, and I had nothing to do with this collaboration except that I happened to catch wind of it and put it very early on when I started my film and included it in my film. But that was it.
When you go to the ed school, let us know, and we'll see if we can be involved.
Okay.
Are there other questions before we thank Diane and Sandra?
I have one last question.
And then,
I don't need a microphone.
oh, yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if you couldn't approach Secretary of Education, Mr. Duncan, and ask him to place this film in every school library so it's part of the curriculum, and then try to set up a pilot program whereby the wealthiest business owners in the communities, the most needed communities like Birmingham, where the mayor on Martin Luther King Day is bragging about new jobs at McDonald's, and a pilot program whereby the young middle schoolers and high schoolers of the poorest families, whites and minorities, get adopted into a work-study program by the wealthiest community business leaders. And the combination of the film and the hands-on applied learning might make for an even better film. And just...
Sounds good. Do you have a direct line to him?
Eric Holder does. And he has some time on his hands.
One more person there. Sorry. Short-term memory problem.
I just want to say thank you, Sandy. That was fantastic. And I've seen this film in a lot of different iterations, and this was like incredibly beautiful and so different from the rough cut that I saw. So really, bravo. This isn't really a question. This is more of a comment. I'm a visual artist, and I think that this is a real tribute to the power of how art can suspend time and place and create the opportunity for this kind of learning to happen. And it's just very distressing to me to see what a missed opportunity it is in general in education. I mean, I know there's a lot of effort, like there are people that talk about it, but it really doesn't happen in a big way, and it doesn't even have to just be in the schools. I've been thinking that in our own government, we should be having artistic collaborations. But I really think that when you see how the function of theater, it's sort of like a colloidal solution where all of these parts can kind of hang, and it was just incredible, and I think your film really showed that, and I wanted to point it out because nobody's really talked about how you showed how the art really worked.
Yeah, that's the thing that brought them together, for sure. Thanks, Hetty. Well, thank you, everybody. I am so grateful. Please take a postcard so you can keep in touch. I'd really appreciate. Thank you. I really appreciate your attention.
Thank you again.
Hi, Lonnie. You're not running. No, you're not.